Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Great Scott! There's no crying in baseball!
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
This is where the fun begins.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That's right, we're ranking Smile 2. Smile 2 is a 2024 American psychological supernatural horror film. It is a sequel to Smile, released in 2022. Global pop sensation Sky Riley is about to embark on her world tour and begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Honestly, really surprising movie for me. I wasn't that excited to go see it, even though I did see the first one and I remember liking the first one somewhat. I wasn't super excited for a sequel. Usually sequels aren't that good. This one, very surprising. Let's get into it by talking about the 10 essential aspects of a movie. First is plot. Does the movie follow a comprehensive story arc and is plausible within the world that has been created? Now obviously, I always like to harp on the fact that if you're going to make another movie, if you're going to make a sequel, if you're going to add to a series, you got to have a reason for it. Cannot just be for money. You need to be able to add something to the story, add a different perspective to the same story. There just has to be a legitimate good reason to make a movie. Now Smile 2, it has a good reason. This isn't just a money grab, even though the last one did well. I felt there was a lot of heart put into this film, and the plot of this movie does elevate the plot of the last movie. I like that it is a continuous storyline. The beginning of this one picks up where the last one left off, and then it rolls on into Sky Riley, who is a pop star. The circumstances are larger because she is famous, she is well known. Something that lends well to this plot is the fact that she is famous, so she's around a lot of people. And the psychological aspect, it just makes it that much more risky and have more weight on it because she's always around a bunch of people, and she herself is a very influential character. I thought the plot of this movie was really well done and was a nice continuation from the first one. Second is attraction. Does the movie have an interesting premise with a high entertainment value? I always thought the premise of this movie was creepy. The smiling thing is creepy, and though I don't think it's very unique, it has been done before, and this idea of a parasitic demon, I guess, is also not unique. It is something that has been done before. The quality to which it is done has not been done before. It's really well done, and the attraction to this movie is the fact that you are going to watch a horror movie that is creepy, but it's done well. It doesn't sacrifice other aspects that make movies good to just make a horror movie. That's what makes this movie really attractive. Third is theme. What message or truth is the movie trying to convey? I don't necessarily believe that there is a certain message or truth that this movie is going for, but I can see that there is a pattern between the first one and the second one, that whatever this is demon, whatever you want to call it, parasite, attaches to people who have trauma, and it's very focused in the first one, and it's a focus in the second one about dealing with pain and trauma in your life, and how if you let it take control of you, it can really have some bad consequences. Fourth is dialogue. Is there a real feel to the conversation? Something that helps me with this movie is the fact that horror movies, God, they do a bad job so often in so many ways because they're so cheap to make, and they just return a profit so easily because people just enjoy watching something that gets them scared. But I just really appreciate that the little aspects of this movie were done well. The dialogue is good. Every conversation felt like a real conversation. And when they weren't sounding real, there was a point behind that. There was a reason, and I enjoyed that. The dialogue in this movie is really written well, and for a horror movie, it just kind of sets a new standard. Fifth is acting. Are the characters convincing? I would like to start off by saying that the acting in this movie is really good, and not just for a horror movie good. It's good. Everybody who has a role in this movie does their job, and they do it well. However, Naomi Scott, who plays Sky Riley, wow. I mean, I've never seen her in anything else. I know she was in Aladdin and the Power Rangers movies, but I haven't watched any of those movies. So this was my first exposure to her, really, and she was amazing. I mean, really, really good. And the script, it lent itself to having an actor or actress be able to shine, because you really are the main focus, and there's definitely a lot of emotion that comes to this movie. However, I feel she makes the emotion that was going to be shown, and she just brings it to another level. She showed a lot of depth. There wasn't just fear, which I do believe is harder than it looks, and you can tell by the difference between good horror movies and bad horror movies, where the screaming and the scared and the fear, it's just so tacky and bad, and there's a lot of movies that you can see that. However, when it's done well, it's so convincing, and it really makes the movie scary. And she was very convincing as her character, but she just also showed a lot more emotions to the scenes. I honestly think she just like had this amazing like 1,000-yard stare where you just convinced that she is losing her mind throughout this movie. She does a great job of portraying somebody who is just slowly, time after time, something is happening and she's just losing her mind. I mean, honestly, it was legitimately one of the best acting performances I've seen in a while, because I felt it covered a lot of emotions, and every emotion that was needed to be shown was just done on such a high quality level, along with emotions that had no words, just her face, just her expressions. I really felt like this woman was actually scared and was actually feeling like she was going crazy. It also helped that everybody else did a good job, but really I could not praise her enough. I thought this movie showed how great she really is. 6 is cinematography. Is there a creative use of lighting, setting, and wardrobe to convey emotion? Absolutely. This movie is creepy, and I'm not somebody that really gets that creeped out. However, what this movie does is it really pulls you in. It does some good character development. You really get invested, and when you're invested, that's when they can give you the creeps. And the suspense that they put in it, the intensity that they bring into it, they really build up a tenseness in shots. They do the average jump scares. There's a lot of jump scares in this movie, but I will say that I don't love jump scares, but the jump scares in this movie were quality. They did a lot of tension building to make those jump scares really work the way they should work. You could see them coming, but somehow they were still scary. That's how good it was. That's how good the atmosphere was. That even though you knew it was coming, you wanted to look away, it still got you when it came out. And that's just, to me, that is really good writing. That is good directing, to be able to still make me scared even though I know it's coming. And I'll tell you, there were several moments in this movie I did not want to look at the screen. And I am not somebody that really gets scared watching movies like this, but there was just, it was so incredibly tense that when I was watching the movie, you know, I would kind of look away to the stairs a little bit, and I was like, no, I gotta come in. I gotta focus in, watch this, don't be a wussy. But that's just a credit to the director and the filmmaking about just how scary, intense they made this movie. I think they killed it. I thought the director he definitely elevated the cinematography for a movie that is a horror movie. I keep saying that, but horror movies, honestly, they just have such a low standard because there's so many terrible ones that are made. But this had some genuine good shots in it, interesting perspective shots that helped with the character development, about understanding how it's kind of, she's going crazy. I'll point out in the beginning of the movie, the very beginning, the first scene, it's a continuous, almost action shot where it's pretty long. It's like probably an 8-minute shot of just one take, and it's great. It looks awesome, and it's something that is not made in horror movies ever at all. There was just no cuts, and it looked really smooth. The acting was good. There was several perspectives and camera shots in this movie that I thought were just fantastic. So cinematically, I thought it did just an amazing job. 7th is editing. This is all about the pacing of the movie. Now, the movie is 2 hours and 12 minutes. If I had to have a gripe, that is one of them. It is long, and I feel it's been a common theme lately for movies to be way longer than they should. This movie does not need to be 2 hours and 12 minutes. Any horror movie doesn't really need to be longer than an hour 30. I would say I enjoyed this movie, so I really would have been okay with it being an hour 40, an hour 45, but there's no reason for it to be longer than that. There were definitely times that I felt it was dragging out scenes. I mean, they were still tense, they were still good, but, you know, I was convinced, alright, she's going crazy, I get it. There's a couple scenes that's like, I don't need the extra to try and convince me that she's losing her mind, or add to a story that I honestly feel like I know well enough now. I think you could have cut out probably easily 20 minutes of this movie and you would have had the same movie. It would have felt the same. It wouldn't have felt like it fell short. It's just way too long, and that's honestly probably my only big gripe with this movie. 8th is soundtrack. Personally, I thought the soundtrack, I usually do not say anything about the soundtrack. I only mention it if I really notice it, because usually every movie, it has some sort of music in it. It has some soundtrack, but it's honestly usually not that memorable or interesting. This one, I knew it was there because it was creepy, and he had a lot of distorted kind of music in this movie, but when it was playing, you knew it, and it really made the scenes just that much more intense. And that's what really makes great movies, is when you do those little things like soundtrack. It adds to the scenes, and it just bumps them up that extra level and just makes them that much better. And I thought it was used really well. There's also the other aspect of the fact that she is a pop star, she is a singer in this movie, and you know, it could have been, I was a little scared that they could have used it too much and had too much of the singing, or played too much in the fact that she was a singer, but honestly they didn't. They had less of her singing than I thought they were going to, and the parts that they did were, the music was good, the choreography was interesting, but it also weaved into the story very smoothly, very nicely, and that just makes it a nice, smooth, enjoyable experience to watch. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and when they did do those scenes, they had a real reason to be singing, and then the scene had some sort of weight. It added something to the story. I enjoyed that. I thought the soundtrack overall was just really well put together. 9th is directing. I feel the director is in charge of the previous 8 aspects. They're the ones that's got to give it their stamp of approval, put it all together, and make a really good movie. Now, the director of this movie is Parker Finn, and this is his second movie. The first movie he ever directed was Smile, and obviously he has now directed Smile 2. Amazing job. I honestly liked the first movie, but it didn't blow me out of the water. It didn't blow me away. It wasn't that good, but it was an interesting concept, had some good aspects to it, but you know, it could have been better in other aspects. It was surprisingly good. This movie, you know, a lot of directors, they either try to do too much or they don't do enough with a sequel. And sequels are very hard to do when you do pretty well on their first one. He killed it. This is one of those rare examples where the sequel is much better than the first one. I felt he took everything that he did well in the first one and just brought it to this one and made it that much better. And then the writing, the plot was just much better. It was much more interesting. The stakes were higher. I just loved it. I loved everything that he did with this movie. My only gripe is the runtime, but I'm very excited to see what else this guy does. I mean, he's honestly one of the better directors that I've seen in a while. 10th is time. Does it stand the test of time? Obviously, it just came out, so it's hard to tell. Personally, it will stand the test of time. I mean, it is up there as one of the better horror movies. It doesn't stand out with the premise, but I absolutely think it will stand out with the execution. It is a good movie, and it does all of the little things so well that even though you know the plot and you know what's coming, even on a second watch, it's going to be scary. It's going to be intense. That's because he did all of the little things right, and to me, that's what will make it stand the test of time as just a really great horror movie. Now for the review section. Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it an 86, The audience gave it an 82, and IMDb gives it a 72. As far as 72 goes, I just think that's far too low. I don't really quite understand any gripes with this movie, why people would say it's like a C movie. It's definitely not average, and especially for horror movies. It does a lot of things well. It definitely deserves to be above the 70 range. 82 and 86, I can agree with being somewhat in the B, but personally this is a high B, low A. I would probably, if I put it somewhere, would put it in that low A, that 90 mark. It's a fantastic movie. It does a lot of things well. I had somewhat of a gripe about the runtime, but there's only so much potential that this movie had, being a horror movie, being the premise that it was, and I think it exceeded those expectations and got to the peak of which this movie could have been. I thought it just did so many things really well, and it deserves to be in that high B, low A range. Now for the rankings. For the year of 2024, out of 20 total movies on the entertainment side, I have it 11th, just below Civil War and above Transformers 1. Now, I do have to preface this entertainment, it is really just my opinion on movies that I would watch again, and it's not that I wouldn't watch this movie again. I just don't know if I would choose to watch this movie again. I'd have to be in a really specific mood, and I just wouldn't do it on my own. I would choose to show this movie to somebody, but I wouldn't watch it on my own, and that's where it lands. It lands at the very top of movies I would just not choose to ever watch on my own again. And that's why it's above Transformers 1, another movie that I wouldn't watch on my own, but if it came on, I would continue to watch it, or I would show it to somebody else. So I don't want it to seem like this movie is not good and not entertaining. It absolutely is. It's just not my preference personally. Now, I got it below Civil War because that's obviously the bottom of movies I would decide to watch again. I would definitely watch Civil War on my own again. I just don't think on my own I would sit there and watch Smile 2 again. But it was a great film and was very entertaining. Now, cinematically, out of 20 total movies, I have it second, just below The Wild Robot and above Civil War. Now, it's above Civil War. It's honestly not even really that hard for me because the emotion side will always be there. I think it will always be tense. Like I said, he does a lot of the small things right, and I feel on several rewatches of this movie, you will still feel really intense because it just does a really good job. Civil War, the only emotion about it is within the plot. It's within the story, and you kind of feel that emotion with a couple scenes, but a lot of it's just you thinking as you watch the movie, and I just personally think Smile 2 does a better job with that emotion. Now, I have it below The Wild Robot just because representing cinematography as an art, this is somewhat of a personal play here. I just think the art of the emotion in The Wild Robot is just a little more pure. It's a little more sweet. And if I had to represent movie, if I had to choose a movie to represent cinema, I would choose the one that has a real heartfelt, beautiful message behind it. Not just a movie like Smile 2 where it's just great at making you feel really, really tense. I just think that represents the art better. But they honestly both do a real good job of having emotion in their movie, and that's what puts them up at the top there. For the decade of the 2020s, out of 22 total movies, on the entertainment side, it's going to be 12th. Again, just below Transformers 1 and above Civil War. It's there for the exact same reasons as before. Cinematically, out of 22 total movies, it's going to be second again, just below The Wild Robot and above Civil War. It's there for the exact same reasons as 2024. Now, for all time, out of 31 total movies on the entertainment side, it is 19th, just above Transformers 1 and below Civil War. Unfortunately, again, it's there for the exact same reasons as 2024. Cinematically, all time, out of 31 total movies, I still have it second, just below The Wild Robot and above Redline this time. Now, above Redline, dude, I love that movie. I think it did so many things well, and the story was super interesting, but the thing it was lacking was emotion. I didn't really feel a whole lot of emotion watching that movie, other than maybe just intensity. Smile 2, it just hits the emotion better, and it does everything else well as well. And I feel emotion is the thing I cling to as just the most important part of cinema as an art. I mean, if you can get me that invested in a movie that you've got me scared, or you've got me crying, or you've got me laughing, then you have done exactly what makes movies beautiful. And that's what Smile 2 does. It really gets you roped in. It's a beautiful piece of cinema, and easily stays there at the number 2 spot right now. That's all I got for Smile 2. I may be hyping it up a little bit. I don't think so. I think it's a really, really good movie. Make sure to comment. Let me know what you thought. If you want to hear a different opinion on this movie, go check out my best friend, Basso Movie Reviews. He will be doing a review on Smile 2 as well. And he does all kinds of other reviews. He has the exact same format as I do, where he ranks it against the same year, decade, and all time. So go check him out if you want to go see a different opinion on movies. Make sure you comment a movie you want me to watch, but subscribe if you want to see me make that video on that movie. But otherwise, I'm Mr. Majoritarian. Stay classy, San Diego.